bigger than the other one.
I knew the right person to ask.
Huh.
And do we have to measure them?
Huh?
Yeah.
I think we're going to let you slide by them.
All right.
Hey, Don? Don?
It's just us. We can do it the way we want. How's that?
Well, I guess.
Yeah, one that,
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
none of those, it was spelled N-E.
Well, that's C-130.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I did that. But there is an item.
You?
Yeah, that's not me.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know,
The story of Fort Congaree II offers a glimpse into an oft-forgotten chapter in the history of colonial America. Fort Congaree II was built in 1748. It played a vital role in the history of the Midlands of South Carolina. It was built at a time of rapid growth and settlement in the area. It commanded a strategic position at an important crossroads, at the intersection of the Congaree River, the Cherokee Path, and the northern limits of Cayce town. Cayce was the first backcountry settlement of South Carolina up from Charlestown. In peacetime, Fort Congaree II's garrison bustled with activity. Farmers and merchants, African slaves, indentured servants, Catawba Indians, local settlers, and ministers visited often. Soldiers and settlers worshiped together, conducted business, and even married each other. The fort protected upcountry settlers from Indian attacks and gave them peace of mind. It helped South Carolina support the struggling but loyal Catawba Nation. Its soldiers left their wives and children behind and participated in the opening battle of the French and Indian War. The fort's first commander, Lieutenant Peter Mercier, made the ultimate sacrifice to the British cause. Not long after taking command at the fort, Peter Mercier met Elizabeth Haig. Elizabeth was the widow of George Haig, who had been tasked with bringing peace between the Indians and the European settlers in South Carolina. While on a peace mission, Haig was kidnapped by Indians. Elizabeth went to great extents to have George released, but in the end, George Haig was executed by the Indians. Despite the great personal loss, Elizabeth was instrumental in having Fort Congaree II built to protect others from a similar fate. A bond developed between the fort's new commander and the widow. Peter Mercier and Elizabeth would soon marry. By the summer of 1754, a new character came on the horizon. The young George Washington's military career began as a major in the militia of the British province of Virginia. In 1753, he was sent to Pennsylvania as an ambassador from the British Crown to negotiate with French officials and Indians. On an expedition in 1754, Washington and his men attacked a French scouting party, killing the French leader. The act of aggression escalated the French and Indian War and led to the global 7 Years' War. The French immediately started attacking forts that Washington was involved with. Under great duress, Washington requested assistance. Mercier and several of his men headed to Virginia to help Washington. Things were desperate, and Mercier must have been thinking about his wife Elizabeth, who was almost full term with their first child. While en route to Virginia, on June 27, 1754, Mercier wrote his last will and testament, leaving everything to Elizabeth. On July 1, 1754, Mercier arrived to help Washington build Fort Necessity. On July 3rd, the hastily built fort was attacked with a vengeance by the French and Indians. Washington's group was outnumbered 3-1. The men from Fort Congaree II fought valiantly and to the death. Mercier continued fighting after being shot on 2 occasions during the battle. A third shot finally killed him. The battle was lost, but they saved the life of Colonel George Washington, allowing him to fight again for something much bigger. In a letter documenting the horrific experience at Fort Necessity, Washington singled out Peter Mercier as a hero, stating, "The number of the killed on our side was 30 and 70 wounded. Among the former was Lieutenant Mercier of Captain Mackay's independent company, a gentleman of true military worth, and whose bravery would not permit him to retire, though dangerously wounded, till a second shot disabled him, and a third put an end to his life." The heart of Fort Congaree II was lost at Fort Necessity on July 3, 1754. But the bravery and sacrifice of the fort's men would lead to the birth of a nation. By 1760, Fort Congaree II had fallen into disrepair. Little is known about the fort during its final years, except that Colonel James Grant, in 1761, chose the fort site as the training ground for a 2,800-man group of British regulars and South Carolina provincials. Among these young men were Francis Marion, William Moultrie, Isaac Huger, and Andrew Pickens. As the group moved out and toward the town of 96, South Carolina, the Cherokee attempted an ambush. The British and provincials held their ground, inflicting twice the casualties. The Cherokee expended all their ammunition in the battle. Grant and his men, without resistance, systematically burned 15 Indian towns and 1,500 acres of their crops. With another British army moving in, Cherokee chief Attacullaculla gave up the fight. By 1763, the French and Indian War was over. Those young South Carolina men who took part in the final phase of Fort Congaree II, Marion, Moultrie, Huger, and Pickens, would go on to be heroes of the American Revolution. Aided by their former foe, the French, these men would turn the revolution around in South Carolina and drive the British to their final battle in 1781 at Yorktown. There, the British would fall to none other than General George Washington, the man who had been saved 27 years earlier by the men of Fort Congaree II.